Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty, my favorite day of the week. I look forward to Friday all week long because I either get to do a monologue where I share my own insights, which I do on the first Friday of each month, or I get to have extraordinary guests with me here on Finding Certainty. So thanks for being with us as we go into the weekend. Again, this is a great way to end the week, a great way to start the weekend. So my guest today is Mr. Chris O'Byrne. He's a good friend of mine. He's an accomplished publisher. He's published over 15,000 books, if you can imagine, over the last 17 years through his company, Jet Launch Publishing. He's also the editor-in-chief of Pivot Magazine. So, Chris, thanks for being on the show today. Really looking forward to hearing your story and sharing with our audience.
I am so glad to be here, Patrick. Thank you.
Well, I'm appreciative. I know you're busy. And you're actually the first publisher I've had on the show. I do have a guest who helps people self-publish and kind of helps people craft their stories. You're on the other end, though. You are actually partnering with them and really taking the headaches of publishing off their plates. You've got so much experience. Not only do you help people publish, but you really help them create bestsellers. I mean, many of your books with Jason Miller and others who is our mutual friend have gone on to become international bestsellers. And there's some secret sauce there. I'm sure we might get into a little bit of that if you don't mind sharing some insights. So, but thanks for being here. I do appreciate it.
You bet.
So
where would you like me to start?
Yeah, I always start out the show by sharing a couple of reasons why I've invited a specific guest, why I think you're a good example of someone who's helping others find certainty or helping create more certainty in the world. Obviously, our show is Finding Certainty, and on this show, we unpack this topic from multiple different angles. And it's an interesting topic because it's top of mind for many people. We wake up thinking about the uncertainty in our lives, or we're constantly thinking about, worrying about, doodling over how to create more certainty in our lives. And this is most definitely the case for any entrepreneur, any business owner, anyone who feels like they have a mission in life or a story to tell. I think when it comes to getting our story out, though, so many of us aren't sure where to start, and we need some help, right? So the first reason I wanted to invite Chris to be on the show with us today is that is exactly what he does. He helps people tell their stories, and he's done it for so long and with so many different iterations and versions, over 15,000, as I said, that he's really learned the ins and outs of that industry. Secondly, Chris is an extraordinary entrepreneur and business owner in his own right, but he's not just an expert at publishing. He also owns Pivot Magazine. He's editor-in-chief of Pivot Magazine. And it's a good example of approaching this challenge, this objective of getting our stories out from a different angle. I think it's really important in our businesses, in our lives, that we tackle things from different directions. We don't just try one approach, but try multiple approaches. So whether it's through a book or whether it's through a magazine, through a podcast, a radio show like this, social media, whatever it is that you feel passionate about and would like to do, I think it's important you approach it and analyze it and look at it from different angles. You're much more likely to have success if you try, in my opinion, more than one. As they say, more than one way to skin the cat, right? So Chris, we always start out. Besides this introduction, we start out kind of getting to know you a little bit. So, tell us, if you don't mind, where you grew up, little bit about yourself and what led you into this career that you've created of helping people tell their stories.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of things, so it'll be a very high level overview.
That's all right.
Uh, but at the same time, it's fun to share that and fun to think back. And I grew up on a small farm in southeastern Minnesota. There were 8 of us in the family, and typical little farming family, farming community. And I couldn't wait to leave. So as soon as I graduated, I was in the Air Force and off to basic training and everything that came after that. And then I came back and, just kind of putzed around at a couple jobs that I was able to get, which weren't much of anything. They weren't really skilled. And I'm like, I need to go to college. Let me figure this out. And I figured it out and wasn't nearly as hard as I thought. And I ended up becoming, with my first degree, I became a chemical engineer. And then
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was fun. I loved it a lot, and was ended up in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and got to love Wisconsin because of that. But then I did that for a number of years, and then grew dissatisfied, which is kind of the theme in my life, is that dissatisfaction. Because when you're in this position, you're pretty much the latter is you go into management and you're not even doing anything with engineering. You're running schedules and manage people, and I just wasn't what I wanted. So I wanted to have more of an impact. Word that gets used a lot, but it's true. We want to have a deeper purpose to what we do. And
Mhm.
so I thought, well, I'm going to become a teacher. So I went back and got my teaching degree. Didn't have much more to do because I became a science and math teacher. So it was just a few more courses. Um, and then I went into teaching and I taught in public schools. And then an opportunity came along to start a charter school in Minnesota. And I loved that process. And I'd say that was kind of the first inklings of building a business, because in a sense, building a charter school has a lot of similarities. Uh, and so then I started diving into that. And I also didn't want to live in Minnesota anymore. So I had a quandary. And I decided to leave teaching and figure out how to become a business. Well, not how to become a business owner, because I wasn't thinking that far yet. It was, how do I make a living online and live in Arizona, which is where I wanted to move to? And
Hmm.
so I just made the leap. And in that leap, I struggled quite a bit, tried different things, and eventually fell into freelance editing. And that was the start of what became Jet Launch. So I started doing editing. And then one of my clients said, Hey, do you know how to do an ebook? I said, Sure. Then I looked it up online and figured out how to do it. And then same thing happened with a print book and then a cover. And I thought, oh, there's something to this. And then I also realized, wow, I am a terrible designer. I can see good design, but I can't make it. So I hired a cover designer. I hired somebody to do the interior. And pretty soon I realized, you know what? This is a business. How did this happen? And then I dug into, how do I grow a business? And I threw myself into it. And the more I dived into building a business, the more I fell in love with that. So I love books, grew up loving books. I love what I do. But my real love is the whole business part of that. And so the
Mhm.
education here, from there on has been, how do I build a better business? And that's how Jet Launch has grown over 17 years to do this many books. We do books for people directly. We also work with a lot of publishers, and a lot of publishers hire us to do the pieces of editing or design or marketing. And so that's what it's evolved into. And then Jet Launch itself, and we'll get into that later, but that's become kind of this one-stop shop where it's everything from writing to editing, design, publishing, and on out to marketing. And after this many books, figuring out, all right, what kind of marketing actually works, because that was the biggest one. In the
Right.
During that time, I also had 5 kids and 10 grandkids. So I have been
You've been
keeping.
busy.
I've been busy.
Congratulations. I have 5 children myself. Interject a couple of things. My wife is a dairy farmer's daughter. So I always
Ah,
say I married the farmer's daughter. She grew up in Blackfoot, Idaho. And her dad was a school superintendent as well. So he was a farmer and a teacher.
yes.
And thank you for your service.
Thank
We
you.
have a little bit similar paths because I joined the Army when I was 17 to help pay for college and kind of get out of Utah where I grew up and go experience a little bit of the world. And it was a great experience, right? But we were talking about Wisconsin before the show because I spent a summer there selling yellow page advertising. That's how I worked my way through college and together with the GI Bill and so forth. But Wisconsin is one of the prettiest places I've ever spent time in. I was in Sturgeon Bay and Rhinelander and these areas that are just gorgeous, right? I could probably live there if it wasn't for the winters. But,
Yes, it is beautiful.
so as you transition from chemical engineer to teacher to entrepreneur, and you said interesting insight, I think, where you said it just kind of happened. It kind of became a business, and it wasn't even something you necessarily set out to do. And isn't that the case for so many entrepreneurs? You're good at something, or you're passionate about something, or you're desperate because you can't find a job, and you start a business. And it's most definitely been the case in my life, right? It's interesting because as entrepreneurs, we are an accumulation of our experiences. Sometimes it's planned, but many times it's not, and it just kind of evolves. As you talk with entrepreneurs throughout your career, I know you work with a lot of them because many of the published authors you've helped and worked were business owners. How often do you find that to be the case? That they had a plan or it just happened by almost on accident? What's been your experience?
It seems to be more by accident that it happens, or they'll have an idea and and then it'll turn into a business. They'll have an idea like, I wonder if this will work, and so they're not approaching it from the other side of, what would make a good business and how do I, it's almost always from that other side of, oh, I have a great idea, or I'm doing something and it turns into a business and they don't realize it at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a good friend of mine named Adam Torres. He owns a company named Mission Matters. And he was the first guy that I worked with when I published. I was asked to be in a book called Mission Matters that focuses on CEOs whose companies are making a difference. And I just wrote one chapter. I was also asked to write the introduction to the book, and that was kind of my first taste of partnering with another group or another party to publish a book. And it was a great experience, right? They do a good job. But then I met Jason Miller, who you're a part of the strategic advisor board, is my understanding, right?
Yeah.
Together with Jason, he's got a top 1% podcast, worldwide podcast. I've been on his show. He's been on my show. They help companies all over the country. Are they global as well, or mostly just national?
Mostly national. There is some global parts of it, but mostly within the US.
Right. Okay. So Jason invited me to be a part of his book, Business and Culture, and then we did another one, which was The Visionary CEO. And I was curious, how long have you been working with Jason with SAB? And I know you're a big part of what they do now, and you're helping a lot of their clients, and there's some really great synergies going on there. I was just curious how long you've known Jason and how that came about.
Yeah, it came about through, one of those connections of a connection of a connection and which led me to Jason. And he ended up helping me with my business. And that's how we started working together, is he was doing what SAB does, Strategic Advisor Board, by helping grow and, create a really successful business. And then, he started out with 10 business owners and he stuck to that model. There are 10. One of them had to leave. And so he asked me to be on the board, to be part of it. And then now I'm the CEO of the company as well. And that's how that came about. And it has been really an amazing experience in a lot of ways. It really upped my game when it comes to business acumen, because I learned so much from him, the other business owners, and even the people we help, because they all have their strengths that we're helping with. And that has then made a big difference in how I provide, for example, our marketing services, because it's all about using your book for your business. And it just became a really good fit. But then, you talk about all those synergies. Yeah, a lot of these clients have gone on to do books because it just makes sense for them. It's not necessarily a good move for somebody who's, say they design solar panels. The book, even then, there are ways to use a book. But, somebody who's in a service type of business, or they're a coach or a consultant or a speaker, and they're that kind of business, I think almost everybody in there should have a book. And you had mentioned earlier, almost everybody wants one. And yes, it's when, different surveys, there have been maybe 80 to 90% of people say they want to do a book. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it is. I'm not surprised to hear the statistics are that high. I mean, I talk to people all the time, and I tell them we've had 3 books published, been a part of 3 books in the last year or two. And they always say, "Oh, I would love to do that." Right?
Yes.
Call my friend Chris O'Byrne. Right? But they, I think there's such interest, and they respond in that way because I think when you publish a book, or you're even as a co-author in a collection like the ones we've done, there are 3 main benefits, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I believe there's 3 main benefits. Number 1 is that you have instant credibility when you've published a book, right? Hopefully it's a good book. It helps if it is a good book, but even if it's not, there's added credibility when you can say you're a published author. Secondly, obviously there's the benefit of branding, right? Getting your name out, getting your business name out, and controlling that platform. And lastly, when you have been in a book, you can put it on your website, you can refer to it, etc. If you do it right and publish with a partner like yourselves, goes on to become a bestseller, hopefully even an Amazon bestseller, there can be revenue from that, right? It can be a revenue producing tool. So it's a tool, but also a revenue stream. And obviously the dream is of someone selling a bestseller and getting a New York Times bestseller or something like that. But even if you never get any revenue from that book, the first 2 are invaluable. The credibility and the branding. In my experience, I've experienced it. Right? It's the same as creating this radio show. I had no idea when I was asked to be a host on Voice America how much those 3 would also apply. It's a different medium, of course, different kind of marketing, but the credibility, the branding, the revenue that's come out of the business that's come out of it, it's been surprising to me, actually, how significant it has been. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, and totally agree with you. The credibility is a huge piece. To me, that's not the most important, but it is a very important piece of that, because that credibility can then be leveraged. And so it's about leveraging that credibility so that people know about it. And that leads into the branding. And then the branding leads into lead generation. And that's where you can really see a return on investment from what it costs, both time and money, to do that book. If done correctly, it can be the keystone piece of your marketing. It's the cornerstone. And because it can be incorporated to everything you do, and we can dive deeper into what that looks like. But the other piece is revenue. And what I usually tell people is, as you build momentum, you'll start getting more revenue from royalties from selling the book. And my recommendation is always take that money and put it right back into promoting that book, getting that book seen more, because now you can start doing Amazon ads, and then you can get your book in front of a whole bunch more people. So the more that you can put those returns back into your machine, your marketing machine for the book, the more you're going to reach more people, have more impact, see more leads and sales for your business.
Right. You extend your reach, you extend your impact, and in the process, you extend your credibility, your reputation, your name. When I talk about revenue, it's not even the sales of the book necessarily that can be a source, but it's the business that comes from that book, right? From that platform. I mean, we've opened up doors all over the country. We have clients in all 50 states. Not necessarily, it hasn't all necessarily come from that book, but when people go to my website, when they hear that what we've written, when they read the books, because they've been excellent, right? There's just a ripple effect. And I see an interesting comparison between publishing a book and getting it out there and building a business, because a book is a compilation of experiences and trial and error and failure and successes and everything else, right? And pivots and lessons learned. And the same with a business. Any business is successful is a combination of all of those things. And so there's a really interesting juxtaposition and comparison between those two. I'm sure you've thought about that. You've experienced it, seen it happen many times. But I'm really interested. Really interested when we talk about publishing, what goes into a successful book. I've experienced it a little bit, kind of as an observer and as a participant. But you obviously have a much greater understanding of that. So we've got to go to break real quick, but when we come back, let's get into a little bit more about Jet Launch and maybe SAB, ZAB, and also Pivot Magazine. So don't go away. We're visiting with Chris O'Byrne, and we'll be right back.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Certainty Management can help create more certainty in your life with our deep discount health insurance options, even for 1099s, part-time employees, volunteers, and more. Pay less to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your team. Call 888-684-3122 for a free quote today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, TEAM, like Mary.com.
Have you become a member yet? Sign up now to become a member of Voice America. It's always free and easy. Plus, you get to take advantage of some great member benefits. Get unlimited access to millions of hours of on-demand content across all of our channels. Keep track of your favorite episodes, shows, and hosts in your own customizable library. Find out what shows you might be interested in based on your favorites. Plus, you get insider access with our newsletter. Membership gives you more. Sign up at voiceamerica.com and click register at the top right.
If you're a nonprofit in need of funding, we can help. Certainty Management is a cost reduction firm that also helps churches, schools, sports teams, and other nonprofits raise unlimited zero-cost funding. Best of all, you don't have to sell anything or ask for donations. Call 888-684-3122 to learn more today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, TEAM, like Mary.com.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back to Finding Certainty. Having an engaging conversation with my friend Chris O'Byrne. As I was speaking with you over the break here, Chris, we're talking about our kids and our families a little bit, talking about marriage even, right? How just like business, just like publishing a book, there's a lot of complexity and challenges that go into relationships. I've been married multiple times. First one was for 7 years, second one was 9 years, and now I'm at 12. My wife's looking forward to that 17-year anniversary. She'll be longer than the other two combined, but she is happy to be the longest tenured marriage so far, right? And so as we talk about these topics, whether it's marriage and relationships, whether it's publishing a book, whether it's building a business, one of the things that I am continually brought back to with these interviews and this show and just seeing it happen right in our own business is that not only does it take a lot of persistence, we talk about pivoting and failing forward and all these types of things, but I believe that we have to keep our eyes open to two main things. Number one, what's important to us, where's our heart want to be, what is our passion? They say if you're doing something you love, it doesn't feel like you go to work. And two, we have to be open to opportunities. You were an engineer. You enjoyed it for a while, but then you started getting to a point where you felt maybe disillusioned. You didn't feel like you were being challenged, or didn't feel like there was the creativity that you wanted, or whatever the case might be. I think it was really valuable for you to recognize that and do something about it. Because there are so many who feel that way and just are either too afraid or too uncertain to do something about it, to step out into the dark. And so I think it's a really valuable characteristic, really important strength for anyone who is trying to create more certainty in their life, to have that courage to one, recognize it, and two, have the courage to do something about it. And then secondly, we talk a lot on this show about ripple effects or domino effects. Once you take that first step, see where it takes you, follow where it goes, right? You talked about meeting Jason Miller and how important that has been, what a great connection and relationship that has been for you and your business and so forth. So as you've watched entrepreneurs producing their books, and as you've worked with others through SAB, strategic advisor boards with companies, how often do you think these entrepreneurs that you're working with, these authors that are publishing and working with you to publish and tell their stories, how often do you think people make it by luck or by fortune? How often do you think it happens because they were just in the right place at the right time? And how often does it happen because they just dug in and did the work and followed those opportunities? Do you understand what I'm asking? I do. Luck? Is it luck, or is it work, or is it a combination?
I definitely think it's a combination. There are for sure people who kind of are in the right place at the right time for an opportunity. But then the opportunity doesn't go anywhere if they don't have that stick-to-itiveness, if they're not consistent and keep at it. And because I've seen people luck into something, but then they don't keep at it, they don't do the work. And partially because it came so easy to them, they don't realize you have to do the work. They haven't learned a lot of those lessons the hard way, or learned from other people what they learned the hard way. So luck is great, but I think you also create your own luck. And So even if you're not lucky enough to get one of those situations, you can create that situation. You can connect with the right people and connect with enough people who you think are the right people to, you know, to find that luck in your life, those opportunities. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen because you're sticking to it. And so I think the sticking to it part is the much bigger key to success. And I also think that in order to reach a level of certainty in your life, because we're all searching to find that certainty, you also have to embrace a level of uncertainty first. And throughout, actually, I think you always have to also embrace the uncertainty, because every new opportunity is going to come with that uncertainty. So embracing that and allowing yourself to still keep working and working toward the certainty and creating that yourself.
That's a really interesting point. I don't know that I've ever had a guest or a speaker verbalize that or recognize that in the same way, but you're absolutely correct, right? We know there's opposition in all things. We can't ever be warm if we haven't been cold. We just wouldn't recognize it, right? There's no such thing as light without dark. It's an eternal principle. But I think it's a really insightful comment, because we can't experience certainty. We never will without having experienced some uncertainty to begin with. The goal is obviously for most of us, is to try to create more certainty, keep working toward it, and building our finances and building our relationships and finishing that book or whatever the case might be. But anything we start out with, we are very much stepping out into the dark, whether it be a business, a book, a marriage, whatever. I mean, nobody gets married without some uncertainty, right? We may feel 100% convinced that this is the person, but it's still frightening, right? I mean, we know it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of commitment, a lot of forgiveness, and so forth and so on. And so I think it's a really important lesson to remember, a really important point, because if you don't understand that, I think it's going to be even more difficult, and you're even more likely to fail, because you think something's wrong. You think you're doing it wrong, rather than recognizing this is part of it, right? I expect it to be hard. I expect to have growing pains and make mistakes and fail forward. But when we do that, aren't we on the path to success?
Yeah, and I think there's another piece to that too, which is, because I have seen people who got lucky and built a pretty successful business, and then it failed on them. Something happened. And I think we have to keep in mind that in order to have a lasting, successful business, we have to grow into the kind of person who can run a lasting, successful business. If we're not
Really
working
important.
on growing into that, then we're going to stay at the same level and we're going to get the same results.
100%. I'm a big fan of coaches. I hire experts to do what they are good at, right? Part of that is, and I completely agree with you, we have to become more. We have to become a better leader, a better follower, a better delegator, all these things. But one of the ways that we can fast track that and speed up the process, accelerate our learning curve, is by partnering with and working with mentors and coaches and experts like yourself. I mean, I probably still to this day would not have published my own story, my first book, had it not been for Adam Torres's help. I wouldn't have done the next two without Chris O'Byrne's help and Jason Miller's help. I don't know that it ever would have happened, even though I had talked about it for years, right? So how important do you believe it is that someone works with someone like yourself versus trying to do it on their own and figure it out? I mean, there are different lessons. If you try to do it yourself, you learn by doing, you learn by failing. But how important is it, in your opinion, and this is a loaded question, of course, but how important is it to partner with someone like yourself?
Yes, It's very important. And I do the same thing. I have my own coaches, I have my own consultants, people who are helping me because we all have blind spots. And to work with somebody, I would say, like, even if you're working with someone like me where we can handle everything for you, don't spend your time trying to figure out all this stuff, because then whatever else you're doing is going to fall by the wayside. You're going to have to put so many hours and time and effort into it, and then you may not even be that good at it to begin with. So instead, take a couple of hours, get an overview of the process, understand how the process works. So if you're going to write and publish and market a book, you don't need to know all those steps. Just figure out, what does that look like overall, and then do a search for things to look out for, stumbling blocks along the way. What should I be aware of along the way? And that's a good use case, by the way, for ChatGPT, as you can type it in there, has access to this huge database and can pull those answers in more easily for you than hoping to find someone who's already written about it. But the coach, no matter what it is you're doing, and even if you are learning a new skill, because that's going to become your bread and butter, don't you want to be more effective, shorten the learning cycle, and learn from people who have been successful at it? So I don't see a situation where it doesn't make sense to hire a coach or a mentor or somebody who's been there before you and has been successful at it.
I would agree completely, for multiple reasons, right? It's going to accelerate your learning curve. You can do it in a shorter amount of time and get it done faster and move on to the next step. Usually the outcome is going to be better, right? You talked about how you realized you weren't a very good designer, so you hired someone to do the covers of the book, and another person maybe is a better editor, another person is a better layout or typesetter. The list goes on. I'm a firm believer in hiring experts who do what they do, who are good at what they do, because that's why I didn't finish my own basement, didn't put in my own sprinklers. I won't try to do my own landscaping, because that's not, even if I took years to try to figure it out, there's someone who's done it for generations, right? It's their family business. They've done it for 100 years. So why not hire that person or that company? Because ultimately it's going to save you time and the end result's going to be better. I think also you make a really good point, Chris, about looking at it from sort of a 10,000 foot view, looking at the process, understanding the overall process, and saying, which part do I want to do? Maybe I just want to be part of the planning portion and assign these off. Another good characteristic for any leader, of course, is the ability to delegate. It's hard for me. It's one thing I struggle with, but ultimately the end result happens faster, it's better, and you can then focus your time on the things that you're really good at or that you really care about, that you really want to do. That's my goal. I say to my team all the time, my goal is planned obsolescence. I want to replace everything I do that I don't like to do with someone else, right? That's my goal someday. So about one more minute for our next break. Any other thoughts on this topic before we go to break?
Not really. I just emphasizing to always look for that. And if you decide to do it yourself, fine. But at least look into the possibility and look at compare what am I going to get if I hire a coach versus if I try to do it myself. In the end, I may have this knowledge and this expertise, but again, it's going to be minimal. It's not going to compare with somebody who's done it for years or, like you said, generations in some cases. So then what are the benefits? And then what should I be focusing on that will bring me, the 80-20? What's this little bit that I could do that will bring me 80% of the benefits that I need from this situation? And then discipline yourself to only do that and not get sidetracked into doing more, because we're entrepreneurs. We're always trying to do everything.
We are. That's so true. We are going to go to break. When we come back, let's talk just briefly about your process. When you take an author, how do you work with them? Because that is that 80-20 split. And some authors give you much more to do. Some want to take on more for themselves. Some write, some have you ghostwrite. There's other things that can play into your projects, but let's go to break. We'll be right back here on Finding Certainty, having a great conversation with Chris O'Byrne. And don't go away. Be right back.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
If you're a nonprofit in need of funding, we can help. Certainty Management is a cost reduction firm that also helps churches, schools, sports teams, and other nonprofits raise unlimited zero-cost funding. Best of all, you don't have to sell anything or ask for donations. Call 888-684-3122 to learn more today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, Team, like Mary.com.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
Certainty Management can help create more certainty in your life with our deep discount health insurance options, even for 1099s, part-time employees, volunteers, and more. Pay less to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your team. Call 888-684-3122 for a free quote today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, Team, like Mary.com.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You are listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
And we're back. We are fast approaching the end of this show, Chris. Your hot seat is almost over. Do appreciate you being here, though. I'm enjoying this conversation. You know, there's so many people out there who say, I'd love to write a book. I have a story I want to tell, or I have a nonfiction that I know I could teach people and help people with. And I think many of them, they have this dream, but they don't have the vehicle. They don't know how to do it, right? And sure, you can Google things, you can research, you can watch YouTube videos, but I think it's very overwhelming for a lot of people. And so there's all these what's the word? They're unfulfilled authors, right? Prospective authors. So let's talk a little bit about Jet Launch and just how you help an author go from point A to point B, from soup to nuts.
Absolutely.
Just the process from end to end.
So really, kind of how this all started is, again, 15,000 books. You see patterns. Now, we've done a lot, of course, of almost anything. We've done a lot of fiction. We've done some cookbooks. We've done a variety of books, but the majority have ended up being books for people who are in business in some fashion or another. And so we've worked with people like, Ed Milet and John Lee Dumas and Joe Vitale, who is, the big star in The Secret, and, Rachel Peterson, and a lot of people in that area. And so I started looking at what they were doing with their books and how they were leveraging them, how they were using them to grow their business and their brand, and what they did for marketing. And then all of that now has kind of been distilled into what we offer. So the first thing we do is, if somebody doesn't have a book and they want help writing it, that's the first piece that we can offer them. And that is different than a typical ghostwriter who kind of interviews, gets the story, but they're expecting the author to drive what that's going to look like. We've seen what's most effective in a book structure, what kinds of things need to be in there. And I won't go into a lot of that, but you want to start out by really engaging your ideal customer, your ideal reader. Because if you're using your book to build credibility, your brand, authority, build your business, you want to be able to connect with somebody right off the bat. And a lot of authors skip that. Their book is like their sales process. It's all about them. This is what we do. This is what we offer, how I can help you. But you have to focus on the reader first. And there's a way of doing that and digging that out and putting that together. And then once you've got that nailed down, then you can go into, because you're solving a problem for somebody. Somebody's not going to pick up your book because you've got a great hairstyle or you have a cute and clever title. They're going to pick up your book because they believe it's going to solve a problem they have and transform their life in some way. And so when you put that into your book, then you have the opportunity to, here is how you can solve your problem. Here is how you can transform your life. And it's through what that person offers and what they do. I'm working with, you mentioned Jason Miller. Well, I'm working on an 8-book series with him doing the same thing. We are writing the whole works, 8 different books in a series for him. And that's how it works in that part of the process. And then we move into, once the book is written, go ahead.
Let me interject just if I may, because I've experienced that, right? I've gone through that process with you where you asked questions, I recorded answers, and together we formulated this book. We've actually done the 2 together, on culture and visionary CEOs. And so just anyone who's listening, it absolutely works. I've experienced it. And it's very easy. It made the process very easy for me, which I appreciated.
Yes. It can be, it doesn't have to be painful. In fact, what we usually find is the people we are working with, they discover insights into their business process. They understand their customer and their offer so much more deeply because of that. And all of that knowledge and the language that their customers use, we use that exact language in the book because that's what they're going to identify with.
Right.
And
100%.
then that process gets done, and then you move into the editing and the design piece. So that we can go over quickly because it's, you can't just have one person look at it and edit it. You can, but you're not going to get as good of a job as if we have 3 people go through it, 3 different passes, and that makes it so, fresh eyes. It makes a huge difference because our brains are better filters than they are at identifying things.
And different perspectives, right? Different personalities, different insights, different...
Yes, and during different days. Somebody's day might be going great and they get a lot done and it works really well and it flows. And so the design part, that's the kind of the fun part. That's where it's starting to become real. You're taking your idea and you're turning it into something real. And we work with our authors. We help them by giving them some ideas to start with, but then we create something that's custom and it works for them and their brand and all of those pieces so that when it comes out the other end, they're holding in their hands this beautiful book that they feel proud of. Doesn't look like it was self-published by, somebody's nephew in their back garage.
Right.
Then there's the publishing. And when you think of publishing, think of distribution. Publishing is getting it out into the world. Putting it on Amazon is what most people think of, and that is the primary spot. There are other places to put your book, but it's getting it out there. And most authors stop there. They think that once their book is up on Amazon, that's all they have to do. Well, that's like painting a beautiful picture, hanging it on the wall in your living room and expecting people to find it and want to buy it. It just doesn't work. There are millions of books on Amazon. So you have to understand how keywords and categories work. And we do that research and how to write a book description, because your book description isn't what the book is about. It's in there, but your book description ultimately is a sales letter. It's copywriting. The job of that description is to convince the reader who's just coming across your book and to want that book and to then buy it. Because if they don't buy your book, they're not going to become a customer. You're not going to impact their life in some way. And so that's kind of what goes into that publishing piece. Then you move on to marketing. And marketing is where I say the magic happens, because a lot of book marketers, their whole point is to sell a bunch of books, put a bunch of social media posts, do these old, outdated techniques that don't really sell your book. So you want, and I won't get into those details, I know we're running short on time, but there is a method to reaching the right people to get your book, to get your book into the hands of the right people where it's going to make a difference in your life and their life. And that's the part that I love, is that book marketing piece on the end.
Well, you've come a long ways from chemical engineer to school teacher to publishing magnate. You know, you have impacted, I know we use that word a lot, but you have impacted thousands of people, Chris, in the process. And I'm one of those. I'm truly grateful for that relationship. I hope we do more projects in the future. The next book, I want to write the whole thing, not just the chapters. But and I have an idea for it. We need to talk more about that. But I'm very very pleased to have met you and have been able to work with you. I know. Want to give a 60-second plug for Pivot Magazine real quick before we end?
Oh, absolutely. So that's another other part of the business, is we produce this business magazine called Pivot. We reach about 30 million eyeballs every month, and really get a lot of really, keep saying really high caliber people on the cover. So we've had Robert Kiyosaki, General Petraeus, the former director of the CIA and ran all the troops in the Middle East, and Joe Foster, the founder of Reebok. Last month, it was Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur. So getting people to have that kind of exposure, I get to interview them. It becomes a podcast and an article. It's been a delightful experience.
Yeah, it's impressive. How do people get a hold of you?
You know, the easiest way is just email me, chris@jetlaunch.net. That's by far the easiest way to do it. Nice and simple.
All right. They can also go to your website, jetlaunch.net, or
absolutely.
And then what is the Pivot Magazines? Pivot Magazines?
Pivot Magazines with an S on it, pivotmagazines.com. But primarily, you're going to want to reach me through the email. And if you want to be, we're looking for great people to be in the magazine who have a story to share.
Well, Chris, we really appreciate you being on Finding Certainty. I know you have a lot on your plate. Thanks for carving out an hour to spend with me. Again, my favorite part of the week, and this has been no exception. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. Everyone out there who's listening, thanks for being a part of our Certainty family. We know you're all over the world, and I think together, collectively, both not just through this show, but through all of our efforts, we're helping create more certainty in the world, and that's a good thing. Have a great weekend. Thanks for listening. Chris, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for helping me being part of your mission.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the Certainty Experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.